So it's we just in Santa Fe, we've been here for 2 weeks and we did one day on that topic. And there's something about, it's okay. So there's two things, there's two approaches to it. One is how to live our life in the framework of the reality of death, and then one, of course, is to deal with the actual situation itself. So I think I've been very moving actually seeing the way in the West now more and more people are actually, I remember a conference in Bendigo or was in Ballarat or somewhere. There were all these young people were electing. It was a very lovely, really nice conference. People electing to work with the dying. It was very nice. But especially in Sydney one time, I forget where it is in Sydney. There's this children's hospital children where babies and children die, and I think that's the worst one. It's unbearable for us, isn't it? And there's this lovely doctor there, Dr. Jeremy somebody. I remember there was a conference he did. More than anything was to try to bring death up into the front and not be ashamed and full of guilt and misery about it, especially when it's children and babies. I mean, we cannot cope with that one. And he was such a dear man. I remember he had I remember the morgue for the babies, the dead babies, was decorated like a nursery, and it was open, instead of all this fear and things, and all and this one little boy was walking in and out and saying, "Come and meet my dead brother." It was so sweet, the mothers and the pain and the suffering, because there's so much shame around babies dying. It was such a dear man. So it's really clear more and more these days in our waiting for death, wanting to make it a good thing and not be afraid of it and taking care of the dying. It's wonderful. Of course, unfortunately, along with that too is more more common to hasten people's death. What's the Buddhist view then? Well, as we know very well, if we're a Buddhist, whatever kind of Buddhist, we know perfectly well the Buddha talks about our consciousness coming from a previous life and then coming to this life, and when it leaves this body, it'll go to another life. So that's a very different perspective. I mean, the Christian teaching, you come from God and then you die, and then indeed you need to prepare for the next life. It's true, which is heaven or hell, and so it's a similar approach. So um, so the first of all is the main one is living our life in the framework of impermanence, as we know very well. When Atisha's little text that was used as the basis for Tsongkhapa's Lamrim literature, we know very well that the very first practice, the very first one as a preliminary practice is to think about this precious, the life is this precious life, and the conclusion from it, Atisha's agenda, is to get us not to waste this life. But then the next point, the entry level into the path, the very first meditation, as we know, he gives us to do is to think about impermanence. So Buddha's teachings on impermanence are very extensive. It's one of his first philosophical views. And indeed, meditating on subtle impermanence can even be confused with emptiness because it's so subtle. So the teachings on impermanence are huge. And this is a major teaching. What's interesting, we can see, can't we, that Atisha, he didn't just talk about impermanence in general right at the beginning. He got us to think about the impermanence of this person, meaning death. And I think his agenda, is to get a wake-up call. So you get the wake-up call first by thinking your life is precious. And already that's a brand new idea to us. We do not think that. I mean, look at the number of people in our world who kill themselves because we really, truly do not think that life has any value. It's so utterly tragic. And so, of course, the framework for us as a Buddhist is that, we know perfectly well if we're Buddhists, we've had lives as animals and bugs and dogs and hell beings in the past. And here we are like a miracle having a human body again. So, the reference point for this is to think about how fortunate we are that we have this human life. So then the first point is get energy not to waste it. But then he gets us right between the eyeballs and he gets us, not only is this life precious, but now he gets us to increase our enthusiasm, our will, our wish not to waste this life, but getting us to realize that we will die. And this is a massive meditation. The Lamas say that if we realize impermanence, just realize the reality, had it integrated into our mind, that impermanence is just the way things are and we will die. He says your life is transformed because you don't waste your life when you realize it's impermanent. So we have this we have this deeply instinctive kind of assumption that I'm permanent. We don't think it intellectually. Our mother didn't teach us this. You don't go learn this at school, but it's deep in the bones of our being, which is why even though death is really obvious, there's kind of gross impermanence, which is the death, things breaking, things ending. That's gross impermanence. But the subtle impermanence is even more profound. But a teacher doesn't bother with that. He wants to give us a wake-up call, and he wants us to increase our wish not to waste this life. So he gets us to contemplate three main points, isn't it, about death. So the very first point we know is that death is definite. So we kind of go, well, Buddha, we know this already. Don't give us something more exciting, please. It's kind of boring. So then we sort of wonder, what do you mean by meditate on it? What do you mean by, but forget your cushion. The thing is, we intellectually know that death is definite. The very first point, we know that's true. We know in our lives, bugs die, babies die, dogs die, happy people die, old people die. Death seems to be very natural. But but we don't, but it's always other people will die, isn't it? It's out there, it's distant from us. We don't like to ever think. And this is why I think it's very powerful, the way to get just in daily life, forget meditating on it, but just to bring very practical views into right into our daily life. There, for example, you just see a little animal or a little creature, or a little mosquito, suddenly it's alive, feeling it's permanent as well, and all of a sudden, boom, it's dead. So the real point is this: it'll never be a wake-up call for us, even when it's like, first of all, it's got people out in the world, the bugs and the creatures and the people in other countries, they die. We might get sad, might get upset, we might get angry at the people who killed them. We never really get the real point. And the real point, whether it's the mosquito or the people in Ukraine or in those girls, that couple in DC who just got murdered, the Jewish couple, or anybody, all the time, out of the blue, it happens out of the blue, and we always get a shock. But the real way to get the wake-up call is so simple. You simply say, that will happen to me. You make it personal, because we don't want to think that I will die. Even when it comes to our beloved family, even when we get real wake-up call there, we don't get the wake-up call. We are broken-hearted, we're sad, but we've got to say, and that will be me. Then it forces us to put it right in front. Otherwise, it's always someone else who dies, because we just don't want to acknowledge it. And then we could have to analyze why we have this fear. Why is it? It's just because of intense attachment. That's all. Unbelievable. Even though we think we're a creep, we hate ourselves, we think life is not worthwhile, we still have intense attachment to this person, to this body. And as Lama Zopa says, the main cause of fear at the time of death is attachment to this. More than anything else, attachment to this. So it's something we just have to count. We have to observe the instinct, observe the kind of assumption about permanence. And even though it's not expressed intentionally, it's just in the background of our mind. We have an assumption. And what we're really saying is we don't want to die, but we kind of conflate it with thinking, I won't die. And then the second point gets a bit closer to home, and that really could freak us out. It should really give us the wake-up call. And that is, the time of death is not certain. And this is really clear, but this we do not want to know. We are maybe prepared to accept I'm impermanent and that I will die, but it's always a long way off, isn't it? You think about it. So the way to get this idea of feeling impermanent, we know very well, you look in the mirror, you're getting older. Each day goes by, you're getting one day closer to death. Each day you're getting older. We can see it, and we know intellectually it means we're moving towards death. But because we can't cope, we just don't think it. So it's good. You've got to use simple examples. For me, it's like, when you drive somewhere, even like you go from anywhere, even five kilometers. You start off, you drive, and there's home behind you. And as you're driving, you've got this real feeling, don't you, of moving away from home and going towards the office, let's say, or towards the shop. You have a vivid feeling of moving forward, away from home, closer to the shop. Well, that's how we've got to think about our life. So we wake up every morning feeling exactly like we felt yesterday, feeling this permanent solid me, exactly like we felt 50 years ago. It's still me. Okay, I'm wrinkled, but we don't have a feeling we're moving towards death. And that's what we have to have. And we've got to get used to that idea. We're moving towards death. And it's not meant to be fearful. It's just a fact. So it's any method we can use to change our thoughts is what's necessary. But of course, the key point here is we think, well, what am I supposed to do with that? Why should I think that? Let's make me more fearful. No, when we live in denial of something is when there's fear. If you face the fact of it, the fear has gone, and then everything changes. Everything changes. I remember one woman one time in one class, she said, I live in fear every day that my husband will die. Every day I'm afraid that he'll die. So often the first thing we say is, oh, don't be silly. Of course he won't die. But that's stupid. Of course he will die. I said, well, you know what? I said, you know what? You say to yourself, well, he will die. But then what do you think? Is not panic and fear and hold on to him, but simply and that's the point of what Atisha's getting, when you realize he's impermanent and you realize he will die and you don't know when, then time is precious, then you don't waste it. You don't waste it. You've got a sense of urgency. So the other problem is we just live in denial of it all and just plod along like idiots, never even thinking about impermanence. Or the other extreme is we live in panic every day thinking about death. Neither is relevant, neither is valid, neither is useful. The reality is impermanent. Buddha's key point about everything, his main trip, is that we've got these layers and layers of misconceptions in our mind, and they are literally the main cause of our suffering. So you can look at the attachment, the emotional afflictions, they cause us suffering, but the impulse to believe I'm permanent causes suffering. The impulse to believe there's no karma causes suffering. The belief that we're made by our mother and our mind is our brain is causing suffering because there's not reality. Buddha says getting in touch with reality is the method to get happy. That's his main point, from impermanence to karma to compassion all the way to Buddhahood. It's a really interesting point. So why we are living in fear is because we're not in touch with reality and we're massively attached, and then we have grasping at permanence. And these two go really close together. We can see that in relationships. And this is where, yeah. So I always use the example of, I always quote Nicole Kidman. I love the woman, but I always use this example when she was with Tom Cruise. I always mention this. I read in Vanity Fair 20 years ago, whenever she was with Tom Cruise. And this is a really good point. This is that when everything's going well, when attachment is getting what it wants, when life is lovely and life was fantastic and they loved each other, they had their family, their kids, their lives. And most of us, if we're fortunate, our life is like that pretty much. We go home every day, the house is still there, hubby's still there, things are still there. So we tend to take it for granted. And then because attachment's getting what it wants, this is very powerful, we all do this, because attachment's getting what it wants, we think because it's nice now, it will be nice tomorrow. That's how we dump permanence onto everything, because basically we can't bear the thought that it might change. So we cling on to it. So all I know is that Nicole Kidman at the end of the interview, it was very moving. She said, we will be together until we are 80. Now, we know what she means. We know perfectly well it's not true. You can't guarantee it because we're not clairvoyant. And even she said, next sentence, she said, and if we won't be devastated. At least she acknowledged it. And that's how we all are. So because something is nice now, and this is the point, because I'm living now, because I'm a living person with no sickness, then of course I'm going to be living tomorrow